Sage Wild stuff, some core human token stuff, some Q&As. Welcome anyone who is just watching Rich play his stream. He was playing Vintage, which is pretty cool. But we're here to talk about Epic, so let's get into that. So here is a Wild Sage deck from Worlds. This is what Matt Sperling had played at Worlds. Now this has Uprising and it has Tyrants in it, so we can't really use this as, let's say, a deck on Wednesday when the app comes. But that said, we can look at it for some things, and there are some cards in here that are actually already in core that we would probably just want to play anyway. But you can see here a good mix of champions. He's got 33, 27 events. He has the two Drain Essence, which I like a lot. He's playing Rax's Curse, which isn't legal to us. So if we were looking for a card in the core set that provided a similar effect, you could do something like Dark Knight, which is very aggressive. You could play something like Word of Summoning, which will put a card back into your hand, but it will also not advance your board state significantly. It makes a 4/4 demon, which is pretty slow. The great thing about Rax's Curse is that it makes a demon and kills a zero, which namely would be Muse, or something that your opponent has as well, but Muse is the main reason for Rax's Curse. It also has the Draw 2 mode, which is a lot better than Word, so I'd probably move away from it, from playing Word of Summoning. Like I said, I would probably go with Dark Knight. If you wanted to be aggressive, Wither would be the removal spell. It really depends which side you want to focus on, and that, of course, would depend on how you picked out your other slots. So if you were to play cards like Fire Shaman or Force Mage Apprentice, that means your removal suite can be a little weaker because you already are playing a bunch of other cards. We talked last week a little bit about the power of Wolf's Bite. Wolf's Bite's a great card, and it's not legal yet, so you have to find zero replacements in Wild. So Fireball, Flash Fire are popular. There are other ones like Rage or Lash, again, cards that I like. Matt's deck was completely lacking in in Rage, and I really dislike that. He's playing a lot of really big guys that don't have breakthrough, and so like Skaros isn't legal yet, but he's an 11/11. T-Rex is a 12/10. I think what Matt's plan was just to get in early and often, and if they were chump blocking, that's fine. Most of his guys were going to be bigger. The problem is that the card decks run a copious amount of chump blockers, and a lot of people are playing cards like Bodyguard, and so Bodyguard is just the complete house against this deck, right? Like his answers to Bodyguard are the small removable pieces that would kill Muse, and again, if he's killing Bodyguards, that he's not killing Muses. Same thing for Wolfspite. Um, and so it's just a card that I think like Urgent Messengers is again, it's another card that's really good against this deck, and so I think he needs to reevaluate that. But I made a bunch of decks and put them up here on Foundry. So there's a couple of different variants or versions of Sage Wild, right? So people talk about Sage Wild or Wild Sage as an archetype, and while it's true, there's a lot of variance within that, and that's in all of Epic. And so the most common one that I think of when I think of Sage Wild is this tempo variant, and it's one that a lot of people tend to play. This is completely core only. You can see here again, it's about the same distribution of champions and events, 35-25. This deck I would consider tempo oriented, so it wants to win the game fairly quickly. It wants to take an aggressive stance in the early game and force its opponent to always be spending its gold first, reacting with the threats that it's created. So as again, I said Dark Knight would be the card I would go for tempo, so that's the card that's here. Ice Drake is a great off-turn play. It blocks a lot of things. It has Airborne, and it taps down all of your opponent's blockers. So I was saying before how certain cards create a lot of blockers, and that could be an issue if you don't have Rage. Ice Drake helps a lot getting around that. We're pretty deep into Sage. You can see here we're 27 deep, and because of that, we can reliably hit this trigger. A lot of our cards will also have Recycle or draw cards on them, so we will be able to keep our hand size up. Of course, sequencing and ordering our threats will be important. Hey, how's it going? Nice to see you watching. Sequencing our threads to make sure that we keep our loyalties there is important, but it should be fairly reliable to hit it with 27 in the deck. Juggernaut, again, it's a very aggressive card. It's one of the cards that um, is going to see a lot of play and it has a lot of power in core set only. Breakthrough, Blitz, two very great abilities. It comes with with a draw card trigger, which is amazing for you, as long as you can make the loyalty. So like even just Breakthrough Blitz, the card is solid. It's also unbreakable on your turns. Like that combination of abilities with the 9 power versus 3 defense, that's a very solid card. But if you can ever just trigger the loyalty, it's probably one of the best cards in Core Set, just based on how aggressive it is. It pushes the tempo and requires specific responses in this game. Like again, in Core Set, you're pretty much just going to be taking 9. It's very hard to get a creature down that sufficiently blocks it. Like Lurking Giant comes to mind. There are a couple. Erase is okay against it, but again, it just recreates the problem the next turn, and they're still they put a card back in their hand and drawn a card, so you've each drawn 2 basically. But Erase is probably the most common play that you would see in Core Set. Lying in Wait, which is a card I talked about a little bit last week, would be a great answer, but it's not often played. So I expect a lot of Juggernaut in any of the Sage decks you see. The card's just really solid. Keeper of Secrets. Keeping with my talk last week of controlling the discard pile, even in the aggro decks like this, we want to be able to control the discard pile. We don't want our opponent drawing too many cards with recycle. And here it is, luckily for us, we can recycle, and it's a repetitive recycle. We can do it every turn that it's alive as long as we have a Sage trigger. So that's pretty good in the mid to late game. It's a solid top deck. It's also a 2-power Blitz creature, which again, people will often get focused down here about how it banishes cards from the discard pile and recycles. But 2 damage is non-trivial, and it can definitely attack in certain situations. And at 2 o'clock, again, a tempo play, and it's a card that I think is really good. If you wanted to play Force Major Apprentice here, you could. People have, like I said, Matt did at Worlds, but I personally feel as if Force Major Apprentice is more of a burn card, and it's a lot more aggressive than I'd want to be. The great thing about Keeper of Secrets is that, again, it controls the discard pile, and it has a body of its own. It survives a flash fire, whereas Keeper of Secrets doesn't, or rather, sorry, Force Major Apprentice doesn't. And so I like Keeper of Secrets a lot. Now, that said, if you wanted to be more aggressive, if you wanted to throttle up your tempo, you could switch this slot over to a Force Major Apprentice or maybe move one of the other slots. But again, to me, this card also has recycle on it, and so replacing yourself is important. And one of the issues that a lot of the Sage Wild Burn style decks have is that they will often run out of gas, and that's the way that they lose, is that they can't keep up their threat density. And so Keeper of Secrets is a 0 that keeps it going for you. So I'm a fan of it, and I would play it. Kong is a stalwart. Again, it's just overall value in core. Kong is one of the best cards. It's pretty much kill target creature when it comes into play. There are a few that survive, but for the most part, Kong will kill anything for you. It'll also establish a great big threat for you. And again, it's just overall value. Tempo is +1 for us, -1 for them. We're happy about it. So Kong makes the cut. Memory Spirit is a card that again I think people don't play enough of in any of the formats. Um, you definitely don't want to play 3 copies of Memory Spirit too often because you want to have legal targets in your graveyard to pick up. And so, again, I will play at least 2 copies in a lot of my early decks. The great thing about it is that it's an airborne airbush creature, so you can play it off turn. It's aggressive. It can get back anything for you, including zeros. So if any of your events that are zeros that you get back, you can play immediately the turn you get it. And so a deck like this tends to play a bunch. Now we have Fireball, we have Flash Fire, Lash, Rage, right? And so there's not a huge amount in this deck, but as the format progresses and we get into Uprising and Tyrants, we'll see more zeros that are super impactful in certain board situations that you can pick up with a Memory Spirit and replay. Even Amnesia is a great card to pick up at certain times and just replay. Like, again, if you pick it up and play it, you're going to recycle, so you're going to draw an extra card on top of that. You're going to eat your opponent's graveyard again, which is a solid play. And again, remember with Memory Spirit too, you don't have to get a 0. I'm just talking about one scenario. You can get other things like Surprise Attack to reset in case you have a lot of slow threats. You could rebuy, a Flash Fire, or rather a Flame Strike, or an Erase if you need to draw cards, or a Drain Essence to gain life. There are a lot of good value out of Memory Spirit. It's just, again, it's a card that replaces itself. It just does it from your graveyard. So just to be mindful. It's just a card I really enjoy. Muse, again, it's ubiquitous. It's going to be almost in every deck. A Howling Mine that just always triggers is amazing, especially because it's one-sided. It's also aggressive again. It's a 2/2 ambush, airborne creatures, off turn, make a threat, attack, force action from your opponent. Raging T-Rex, a very aggressive card. It's super slow, but it is a 12/10 with draw 2 on it, so we like that a lot. As Tom points out, you can always surprise attack into Memory Spirit and take back surprise attack, which is pretty much doing nothing except telling your opponent that you have a surprise attack. Because um, the surprise attack goes right back to your hand. The Memory Spirit has airborne and ambush. You're just better off taking nothing. I think part of what he's saying is that you could just throw a blind surprise attack out, and then if you don't hit anything else, um, well, it's not really draw card, Tom, because the surprise attack was already in. Oh, you mean off the surprise attack? Yeah, that's fair enough. I didn't think of it that way, but he's right. You would draw a card off the surprise attack, not off the Memory Spirit, which is where my brain was focused. But even then, that's really suboptimal. I'd rather the surprise attack be something else, but it's something to be mindful of, I suppose, in certain scenarios. Um, that's a good point. I'm playing two Rampaging Worms. So part of the thing we talked about last week was punishing our opponent if they spend their gold first on our turn. And in an aggressive deck like this, you definitely want to have a big, strong Punisher. This is our best one. So if we have gotten our opponent to spend their gold first, now we attack with Rampaging Worm and force them to have a specific card to directly respond to Rampaging Worm. Usually, the kind of cards we'll be seeing would be a zero-cost chump blocker. And if they don't have it, they're going to lose a lot of life. And if they do have a zero-cost chump blocker, that's where our cards like Rage, Flash Fire, Lash, Fireball, etc. If we can get rid of their blocker before damage, we can punish them even further. And that's why we really want to have cards like Rage in our deck, like I was saying earlier. Um, it's possible that this could be a third. We could play a third Rampaging Worm. Finding the slot would be somewhat difficult. You could probably cut a Triceratops, maybe cut back on one of the spells that you're not a huge, like may not like as much, like the second Flame Strike. I'm not a huge fan of that. It all depends on what you want. It's one of those things where playing with the last couple of slots, 58 to 60, things like that. Tom asks, how popular do you think Hasty Retreat will be? I expect no one to play Hasty Retreat. I think that card's pretty awful. Um, you know, again, if I'm not blocking the creature, then getting to draw cards brutal. It's a card that gets you out of certain situations, but it usually means that you just lose the game later, and I don't like cards like that. I want cards that are going to stop me from losing the game, as opposed to cards that are going to delay the losing of the game. And that's not to say that you can't do other things, but slots are so precious, and Sage Zeros, even in Core Set, are super good. And so finding a home for Hasty Retreat is going to be hard. Like I don't have it in this deck, and I wouldn't want to play it in this deck. Um, and I can't think of like a lot of control decks would play Hasty Retreat more than anything, and even then I'm not sure it's right. I don't know. Hasty Retreat's an interesting card in that it has draw two on it, and it's a zero cost card for any attacking threat, and so that's unique, or it's not unique, but it's hard to get in core. But again, it comes over what spots. Like what are we cutting for Hasty Retreats? I wouldn't want to cut the Amnesias. I think they're critical. As I've said multiple times, graveyard dominance is going to come to light more and more to people. I played a lot of decks in the early beginning of Epic that preyed on the graveyard as far as using it on my benefit, and I did that because there were so few people who realized how important graveyard control was, and they were trading that off for advantages that were easily overcome, um, because they were so deep into the same plan. So like Plentiful Dead is a card that makes a zombie, right? And I kind of talked about I don't think Plentiful Dead will be very played, and it's because no one else did besides myself, Rich, Atlanta a little bit, and some other people. But for the most part, it was most of these Sage Wild decks, and Plentiful Dead's a great answer to them, especially decks that were built like Matt Sperling's that don't have the rages or the lashes to push through the damage, because you just throw a 2/2 in front of a 12/10 and it does nothing. And so, in that case, in those situations, the the Sage Wilds decks are very like they have a lot of big guys, and so you just get them to overextend. You sweep their board and take over. Um, yeah. So Tom's saying that he hasn't found spots for Hasty Retreat either, but he can see it in certain metas. And again, if people start going all in on rampaging worms or things of that nature, or move away like even bounce in general, I've said I don't really enjoy in any form of epic, especially in the newer metas. In the older ones, there are some creatures that aren't as oppressive, but if you look here, like Ice Drake has a essentially a tribute trigger, right? The loyalty is when it comes into play. Expend all champions. Juggernaut, draw a card. Keeper of Secrets has blitz. It's a 0. Dark Knight has blitz. Um, Kong, tribute. Memory Spirit, tribute. Muse doesn't, but again, if they're bouncing my Muse, I'm probably doing okay. T-Rex, draw 2 cards. Rampaging Worm is one of the only ones that doesn't have an immediate punish, but it's also got Blitz. So if they bounce it and it was off of a surprise attack, or if there was a way that I got gold again, I could play it. And again, if it doesn't really slow me down, I could just play it again in the next turn. So that's a great one. This one has Untargetable and Tribute. Strafing Dragon, Loyalty, Tribute, right? Thought Plucker has a Tribute, basically, right? Triceratops, Tribute. So, like, bouncing any of my creatures doesn't get you any advantage in the long term. It just buys you onboard presence. And while you can leverage that at times, it's very difficult to maintain that advantage. And so, because I get to just redeploy my threats, and so and they're all doing something when they enter the battlefield, or however you want to call it in Epic, enter play. And so I don't like retreat in general. I don't like retreat that gives my opponent an extra card, or not retreat, bounce, but hasty retreat's the one we're talking about. Um, and so like it's gonna give my opponent in the situations where I need the most, it's gonna give my opponent a card, and I'm not I'm not really happy about that. I'd rather play Spike Trap. I'd rather play a chump blocker, a 0 cost chump blocker. Like Courageous Soul is almost better, or like Brave Squire. Um, I don't know. It's hard to justify. But back on task, Rampaging Worm would be great to punish our opponent with. Sea Titan, again, just pound for pound solid creature, really big, again, creates that tempo for us. It bounces our opponent's best threat that we can target, and then, it's very hard to deal with us without a sweeper. So Sea Titan is super amazing for us. We definitely want to play all the copies that we can. Nothing on it has loyalty, so we don't have to worry about that. It's a great card to play early and often. Strafing Dragon does have loyalty. It's got Airborne and Blitz, which is great. It's usually good for 6 damage the turn you play it, and it's always or almost always good for the 5 when you have because you can manage loyalty triggers, and you can ambush it. So off turn plays are important. This card is one of the critical components to being good at playing Sage Wild or Wild Sage. If you play this card correctly, you will win a lot more games. I see a lot of people who will play this card and then like play their other threat before they attack or things like that. And in Epic, as I've said before, you don't want to spend your gold until you absolutely have to, and you want to get as much information before you spend your gold as possible. And if you're not doing that, you want to be making sure that you're getting tons of value out of it. And again, in this situation, you're just not going to be. So like off turn, Strafing Dragon hit you for 5 or kill a creature, fine. Attack immediately on your turn and figure it out from there. The fact that we get multiple attack steps is great. The fact that we can spend our gold in combat is great. Another thing about Strafing Dragon that people don't always realize is that you can ambush this in on your turn while you're attacking with another creature. So, for example, let's say you're attacking with Kong, right? And they have a Kong and they just block. Well, you can play Strafing Dragon and shoot their Kong for 5 in combat and then attack immediately. Stuff like that. Or if they put a blocker out, so let's say you have a Kong that you had, or a Sea Titan that you had put into play, they play a 0 blocker, or even better, a gold blocker that you can kill with a loyalty trigger. You can, before blocks are declared, you can ambush in the Strafing Dragon, kill the blocker, finish the attack, and then begin your new attack with the Strafing Dragon because it has Blitz. So any creature that has both ambush and Blitz is very valuable, and you need to be mindful of ways to use it. This is, again, to me, this card is the cornerstone of the strong Sage Wild players, and so I would definitely spend a lot of time getting value from it. Thought Plucker, Bay. It's my favorite card. We played it before anything else, and it just does everything that we could possibly need. Again, the tiring on it is slow. We're not going to win the game by damage very quickly, but we force cards onto it. If they have the answers for Thought Plucker, that means they're further down in cards. Then we can rebuy tempo with the other cards in our deck. And then Triceratops is, again, it's a slower creature, but it does have trample inherently, and it replaces itself, drawing a card for you. Also a great thing. It's great on any creature, so we will be happy to play it. Um, Amnesia's right here. Again, graveyard control, critical, draw 2 component, recycle. Card's just amazing for us. Um, this is a card that most people who play Sage Wild don't play. If you notice, Matt did, which I really liked. But the reason why you should be playing Drain Essence is because you want to be able to win the mirror, and winning the mirror often depends on this 9 life swing. And so I've been a huge fan of Drain Essence in pretty much every deck, including today in modern Sage Wild decks. I like it a lot. I would definitely play at least 2 copies, and if not, I would find a place for third and another, which is what I did here. Actually, no, I cut. So I had up. I was testing the third Drain Essence in this deck up until about 10 minutes before we had it, and it was a second copy of Dark Knight, and then I think, what did I put in here? I think I put the third copy of Keeper, maybe, and some other stuff down here. But anywho, again, it's all just what you want to do. Like I said, the last 4 to 6 slots, they're very variable. You have to be able to switch and adjust based on the meta and what you expect to see. Erase, it just draws 2 cards and does something else. In core, it's very hard to keep to find cards that we need to play, and so we're going to be doing a lot of draw twos. And so I'd rather have a draw two that does something than just a draw two. And so Erase makes the cut. Again, as I said before, bounce isn't the best, but in tempo, we want to close the game before they can really recoup the value from the bouncing. So it's pretty solid. We only have 2 fireballs just because of card space, but fireball's great for us. Again, it can deal 3 to any target and 3 to the face. Um, I have more flash fires, and that's normally not the way I go. I normally would play 3 fireball, 2 flash fire, but again, I want to be able to draw cards off the flash fire, and I want to be able to kill multiple blockers. So against the person that has made zombies, has made some other, 0, 1, 1, 2s, 2 2s, whatever. I want to be able to clear them, and so we have more flash fires in this deck. But again, that's another thing where -1 flash fire, +1 fireball. The deck doesn't change that much on how it would play. We have a second copy of Flame Strike here, and that's because we're more likely to kill our opponent quickly, and we want to have the the Flame Strike early. It's one of the best things to do is to reveal Flame Strike to a loyalty trigger to make your opponent play like you have Flame Strike. Um, and like, yes, I understand that you've now tipped that you have Flame Strike, but their entire way of playing the game has to change. That they are at 8 less life than they are right now, and you can do things to supplement that. So, like, let's say you have the Flame Strike and they think that 8 is effectively 0. Well, if you have Fireball or Flash Fire, now it's 10 or 11 or 13, and those numbers suddenly just start changing, and your opponent gets very scared, and they have to play like every single life point's their last life point, and that can really swing a game for you where they have to make suboptimal gold choices. Um, but again, you don't want to have a Flame Strike, like 3 Flame Strikes in your hand when your opponent's at 24, because 3 turn cycles, so much can change. So I only play 2 here. We have a second copy of Lash, or 2 copies of Lash, and again, we play a lot of big guys that have a hard time getting through damage, and so Lash will just do that for us. It also can help supplement damage in a pinch. It does deal 1, so that's relevant. Lightning Storm, I like to play 1 copy. It's basically my third Flame Strike, but it has recall, and it's good at clearing blockers out. Other versions of this deck will have more copies of Lightning Strike or Lightning Storm and Flame Strike. It really depends on how you want to do it. This is the way that I would build core, Sage to Wild tempo. Again, some people don't even play like Ice Strike at all. Some people don't play some of the cards in this deck, but this is the way that I found a lot of success. Lightning Storm, like I said, Psionic Assault. This could be anything in Sage. I play it to get value off of our recurring triggers, and again to punish opposing Thought Plucker, anything like that. Just discard it and then pick it back up. I had a lot of success with that in other decks. If you wanted to make this a different 1 cost gold card from Sage, you could do that, and it wouldn't be a big deal. No, I'm not a fan of Rain of Fire, Tom. So Rain of Fire is draw 2 cards or 5 damage to 1 target, 4 damage to 1 target, 3 damage to 1 target in that order. Um, I often don't find that it kills things on its own that I need to kill. So like people aren't playing creatures that have 5 or less toughness for the most part that I care about killing. I'd rather play a card like Hurricane there. Like if you look, most of the cards on my turn are going to survive a Hurricane, and most of theirs won't. So like if I was going to play another wild one, I'd play Hurricane before I played Rain of Fire. Um, and again, it's just spots. You don't have spots for other things. Like I understand that you can go 5 to your face, 4 to your creature, 3 to your other creature, or some different amalgamation of that, or you even have to hit your own creature or yourself. But again, Rain of Fire just often um, is lacking for me, and so because of that, I almost always omit it from my decks. Um, but yeah, so this is a variant. I would call it the tempo version of Sage Wild. Not everyone plays the cards that I do, but that's okay. Tom says without Smash and Burn, Lightning Strike, Feeding Frenzy, and others, it's worse. And again, what he's saying is that it's not enough. The Rain of Fire, the 5, the 4, the 3, isn't enough without these supplemental ways. So, like with Feeding Frenzy, Rain of Fire can kill any creature. So you put the 3 damage on the creature you want to kill, then you Feeding Frenzy, and they die. The 4 or the 5 you can do to whoever you want. Normally 5 to your opponent, 4 to another creature, or if they have a 5 power or 5 toughness creature, you can do 4 to them and 5 to the creature. It certainly has a lot of blowouts, Rain of Fire. I just feel like it only really blows out people who aren't the best at the game and build their decks improperly or draw awkwardly. And like while it's good to punish awkward draws, I'd rather be able to just play cards that punish good draws and also punish awkward draws like Rampaging Worm, Triceratops, etc. Like these cards are still going to punish awkward draws. So this is just one of my variants or one of my builds of Core Tempo. It's here on the Epic Foundry, just so we can have the pictures. But there's a bunch of other ways to do it. This is a little bit more wilds focused. And so you'll see we have the same distribution, 35 champions, 25 events. And if you noticed, my free, fast, slow is usually in around this area, which is important to note as well. I didn't bring it up before, but um, you just want to make sure that you can play spells a lot. So here, roughly 44 of my 60 cards can be played um, for free and fast. So it's just a good thing to keep in mind. You want to make sure that that's important, that you don't get caught up not being able to make a good gold play. Here we're a lot deeper. We're 45 wild, and because we're 45 wild, we're playing cards like Worm Hatchling, which have loyalty triggers. We're playing Fire Shaman, which has a loyalty trigger of damage. Um, what do you feel about Thought Plucker in some decks, Tom? That it punishes awkward draws, but it doesn't punish good draws. So we'll talk a little bit more about that because I think it punishes good draws a lot. It forces them to have the exact right cards and to use them on that. But while you're getting back to me, I play Pyromancer in this deck. It's a lot more aggressive. We're trying to kill him quickly. It's also off turn, so we lost a lot of those Sage creatures like Ice Drake and things like that. And so we need to have ways to punish our opponent off turn. So Ambush is one of them. Um, yeah, I mean, you're right that Thought Plucker does punish awkward plays and bad players. But I think it also punishes good plays and good players too, and I think that's important. I think you undervalue how it punishes better people, and maybe I overvalue it. But I definitely truly like. It wasn't until I saw other people playing Soul Hunters and Recall cards that I cut it from my card deck at Worlds for day 2 for the event on Monday. It's like when people are playing the hard punishes for Thought Plucker and the removal in the same deck, then I cut it. But until then, I was playing it because it punishes both. Like I said, it punishes good players. It forces them to have certain cards and build their decks in certain ways. And people weren't building their decks in those ways for a long time. And once they started to, I made the cut. You talked me into it, but I had been on the fence about it for a little while. In this deck, even though we're playing more of these burn spells, we only have the one Memory Spirit. Again, it's just finding Sage spots. We cut down. We had 27 in the last deck. Now we have 15. So because we cut down 12 slots, we had to make room. And some of them, again, one of them was the Memory Spirit. We kept Muse because it draws us cards, and that's really important. We went up to the third copy of Rampaging Worm. I played a copy of Sea Hydra. This is a card that's controversial. Not everyone loves Sea Hydra. I like any card with recall, and so I immediately I spend more time looking at it. On top of that, it has tribute draw card, very important, and it can get bigger. Like a Flashfire with a Sea Hydra makes it a 7/12 upgraded. Any amount of our cards. If you had Rain of Fire in the deck, which I do here, right? Because now I have well, I have it for a number of reasons. One is that we're more burn oriented, and two, if we Rain of Fire onto our Sea Hydra, it becomes a permanent, +3/+3, 4 or 5, however you want to see it. And it helps fill our our 45th slot, which is hard to find, or a 30th one gold card. Again, if you wanted to put it somewhere else, you could, but I like it as a Sea Hydra. You could even potentially find a spot for a second Sea Hydra, maybe off a Triceratops. Triceratops has more raw power on its own. Sea Hydra gets better as things go. But nothing really changed in the champion selection. Some of the Firebolt, like again, we have a third copy of Flame Strike, a second copy of Lightning Storm. We actually cut a copy of Lash, which is pretty interesting, right? A lot of our guys aren't going to need the breakthrough because we have so much more burn that we can push it through. And finding zeros, like it's more important to play cards like Worm Hatchling and Fire Shaman than it is to play a second copy of Lash. If you wanted to, you could probably figure out a spot to do it. Um, it's tough just to find cuts that really work, and so that's where we are, looking at these cards. And again, none of these are really different than the last deck. Again, the only thing that's different is I put the Rain of Fires in, and that's just because we're more burn oriented. We're trying to kill our opponent. We cut the Drain Essences in the entire Evil Splash. Again, it was just a matter of space. In the mirror, if you were playing Drain Essences, you'd have the advantage. So it really just depends on what you're looking for out of your deck. So this is a more burn oriented, wild heavier deck. Um, so this is a variant. We saw a deck similar to this last week when I showed my control decks off. But if you look at it, it's pretty much Sage Wild, right? Like we're 36 Sage, 15 Wild. So I would consider this Sage Wild. But again, I'm viewing this more as a control deck. That's just the way I play it. And a lot of these cards are different than the ones we just saw. Blue Dragon we talked about last week comes into play, replaces itself, has Airborne, so evasion is great. 2 damage to a target. Now, we did talk about cards that died of Rain of Fire. This is one of them, but again, we're trying to get repeatable damage, and we're trying to do drawing cards, so it's just solid for us. Once we get to Uprising and to Tyrants, this card falls out of all of our decks, but in the course, it's one of the few cards that really works. So I talked about Force Mage Apprentice for a while, and all the things that does. It's really a good card in decks that it's really a good card in decks that need to kill Thoughtplucker and Muse and have ways to prepare it the turn they play it. And so, like, I would definitely play it in this deck. We could play more, but finding spots again is just really difficult. So it's really up to you and what you want to do. Um, Again, I like it, but I can't find more. I really want Graveyard Control, so I'm playing Keeper of Secrets. You could cut the third copy of Keeper for the second copy of Force Mage. That wouldn't be awful. There's a world where you could cut the Amnesia for the same thing, or one of the Spike Traps. It's really up to you and what you want out of your decks and out of your slots. For me, Force Mage is covered by the Blue Dragon, killing the 2-drop or less. It's covered by the Flash Fires here. So, like, I'm less worried I have Lightning Storm. I'm less worried, like, Spike Trap if they attack me with them. Because I made all these other flexes away from zero-cost cards that deal with Thoughtplucker or Muse, I was able to move away from Force Mage Apprentice. Because it's very weak. It's a 0/1. As I said, I'm playing 3 Flash Fires in the deck, which is very controlling, and it's a great card in the meta, but it would kill all of my Force Mage Apprentices. And so because of that, I didn't want to play them. The Keepers survive. And again, that's just an important distinction. That said, I do have 3 Corpse Takers, and so it's possible that I should cut that to 2. Maybe play a Wither, right? That would also flex me up on zero-cost answers and flex me down off Graveyard Control. But I like Corpse Taker a lot. I think I said it last week, and I'll say it a lot when I'm streaming too. It's a card that's just very underrated by people. The expendability of banish target card from any discard pile. People don't talk about that very much. They don't really value it, but it's very important. And like I said, Graveyard Control in mirrors, in control decks, or in other archetypes is one of the most important things that comes up. And so because of that, you want to make sure that you're able to respond. It also keeps your gold plays up. As I said earlier, one of the important things about Epic is understanding that you need to be able to play your gold whenever you're presented a situation where your opponent doesn't have gold up. So if they played their gold and you don't play your gold, you kind of lose that turn by a lot. And it's not that you lose the game or that it's you can't come back from it, but you want to make sure that it doesn't happen too often, because if it happens multiple times, you just fall further and further behind. And excuse me, if they just draw two cards and you just take your turn, like those cards are going to matter later. Each card in the Epic is so impactful that you can't afford to miss too many chances to play cards. Now, if you both pass, that's fine because no one's advanced further. You drew your card, you're going to pass to them, they're going to draw their card, or vice versa. And in either case, that's fine. The parity wasn't broken. But again, if you play yours and they don't, you're doing really well. And if they play theirs and you don't, they're doing really well. Corpse Ticker makes you get value from your gold cards that were killed already, or even discarded to a Thought Plucker. So I like it a lot, and I think people should consider it more. Again, I think part of it is just that Evil was underplayed and underrepresented for a very long time, and so was Corpse Taker. But the card's sweet. As again with most of the decks in the game, you're going to see Kong. He's easily splashable, huge, big, Corset. He's a super king. Muse, Sea Titan, same deal. Thought Plucker's my boy. He's always going to be around. Timebender. I was talking a little bit last week about, yeah, I guess it was last week too, but in the last stream that I don't really like bounce. I said a little earlier today, but Timebender is unique in that not only does it bounce, it also banishes zeros. So it's actually an answer to or to Muse rather. And again, that's not something that everyone thinks about. But if your opponent plays Muse with your gold up, you can respond with Timebender, banish it. You have board control, etc. You know, even if you're not ambushing it, if you're playing it on your turn, that's still a solid play. And if your gold is again on your opponent's turn, at the end of their turn, after they've made their attacks, if you wanted to, and they spent their gold, if you wanted to ambush, make Timebender, eat a Muse, then go back to your turn and figure it out from there, you could. Again, it's got 4 toughness, so it survives flash fires, which is important. It's a recurring bounce, which is better. You know, I said before it lets your opponent reuse their golds, so bounce is weaker. But because you can keep doing it, you're able to keep the tempo throttle up. And as long as you can keep the tempo throttle up, it doesn't really matter that you've bounced the creature. And if they use a spell to kill Timebender, that's fine, but that means that they're down a card anyway. And so in core set, where there's a lack of other options, the card's more than fine, and I don't have a problem playing it. Here, we're playing the full 3. Tom will be happy to see. Ah, where is it? Winter Fairy. Winter Fairy is a great card. It's a little slow, which is fine, but it does tribute draw a card, which is what we need. It does die to a lot of the removal, like we were talking earlier. Rain of Fire would kill this, so there could be a situation where they blow us out with Rain of Fire in this deck, and we need to be aware of that and play around that to a degree. Try not to play, the perfect suite of 3/4 and then leave them a 5 to hit us with. But at the same time, if they were to Rain of Fire or Winter Fairy, we would draw an extra card, and that'd be swell. And whenever it damages opponent, it draws a card, so that's amazing. And if it's broken, it draws a card. So like, it'll keep our threat pressure up, but it'll also replace itself and likely further. Again, in core set, there aren't too many banish effects that are being played. Wave of Transformation's going to be the most prevalent. Palace Guard probably the next most common. Divine Judgment will be right up there too. Now that I think about it, maybe Inheritance of the Meek in a few decks, but those are really the only ones that I could see seeing a lot of play. I talked about High King, but no one really plays that much good, especially in core. So you're probably okay from that. Um, we don't have like Transform. I don't really see like it's a one of banish. People don't usually play that. And Lying in Wait is a card you'd probably only see from one of my decks. So most people wouldn't play that. So you're probably safe in saying that you're going to draw 2 cards off this Winter Fairy, even if it's immediately broken, and it has the potential to provide you with more. And again, if they use a card to kill it, then you're up again, and so that's pretty solid. Um, Finding space for a third copy would be difficult. It would probably be the Blue Dragon that I would cut, but this doesn't kill a Muse, so like it could block the Muse, but it wouldn't kill it. They just wouldn't attack. It doesn't have ambush, so I like the 2/2 split. Getting into events, which is the crux of control. As I said earlier, Amnesia, again, very important. We need to have it in pretty much any Sage deck. We want to control our opponent's discard pile as much as possible. Ancient Chant, it's the best draw 2 if you're just trying to draw 2, right? It goes to your graveyard. It basically is a draw 3 eventually, and if you ever recall it, you get Ancient Chant back and the card you would draw. right? So it's a draw two even when you recall it. So Ancient Chant is just really solid. We don't have the lesson learned ability to gain four off of it, and we can't frantic digging to draw extra. But even then, we're still gonna want to play Ancient Chant in most of our control oriented decks. When the game goes long, um, Ancient Chant gets better, so we definitely just want to have that. Apocalypse is a sweeper. This one doesn't care about size; it just kills everything. So in the off chance that our opponent is able to use those tempo cards that we were showing before, they get ahead of us. We just reset the board, and we'll take back from there and try to reestablish our presence. Drain Essence is critical to all control decks. It is kill your guy, gain 9 life. Again, that's just a huge tempo swing, and it gives you time to reestablish. We definitely want to play it. Plus, the original art, this guy kind of looks a little bit like Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi, so I love it. This is one of the few cards that, even though the alternate art exists, I'd rather play with the original just because I like how it looks and what it represents. Um, Erase. It's a draw two that does something. This card could be something else again if you wanted to, let's say, cut the Force Mage Apprentice into erases and play some more wild cards, maybe even some good cards. Like if you wanted to play a Watchful Gargoyle and two Palace cards, that'd be fine. You could do that. Um, but again, it's just this is about keeping cards in our hand and keeping control of the board. In Core Set, there are just better cards later, but they don't exist now, and so we play a race. One copy of Flame Strike, and I'm sure that's amusing to some people who play Control because it seems like a burn card, but again, it's you exert control of the game by your opponent playing like you have Flame Strike, and the ideal scenario for you will be that you use this to kill a creature, and then your opponent plays like you have two more copies in your deck. You really don't, again, you don't want to have a lot of them, but you want your opponent to play like you could, and that's just very important. Um, Talked about Flashfire already. Hurricane's an off-turn sweeper, 9 to each champion. That kills a lot of things, but it won't kill any of your big guys. So Kong and Sea Titan both survive this. Everything else that we play will die, but we can't. Again, if we're behind on board, we have to make plays. And again, keeping our bigger guys up will help us and help us keep control of the board. We have the one Lightning Storm mostly because it has recall, but it is divisible into 6 different targets, so you could kill a bunch of little things. There's a world where we play a second copy of Lightning Storm or a third copy. It's not the worst card. We would play Fireballs in the 0 slot, or maybe another Rage. It depends what you want. Um, as I said before, the one of Lying in Wait. I like playing one of a lot of cards in Epic, especially cards that have draw two. The reason why I like them is because they make your opponent play like you could have more copies. They don't know your deck list in most situations, and so if you have one Lying in Wait or one standalone, your opponent will play around it like you could have a second copy, and that'll get you value. And the Flame Strike too. And so especially in when you play online in the app, people aren't going to have your deck list, and they're going to want to. They may play you again. They get repaired against you, and so you want them to play like you could play anything. Like the cards in your hand could be devastating, and they have no idea what they are. The more information you give your opponent, the worse it is. And so one ofs that also have draw two are very attractive to me, especially when they like do something unique. Like this punishes single attacking. This punishes single attacking with untargetable creatures, stuff like that. So like let's say my opponent has like a Sea Titan and a human token. Maybe they attack with both of them together, and that buys me value, right? Like if I chump block, now I have also blocked the human. Or if they attack with two creatures, like I don't know why they would do this, but let's say they attack with Steel Golem and Sea Titan. Now they're doing that to play around Lying in Wait because they don't want to get caught by it. But now I can just play an ambush creature and chump block. So it's just something to think about. Like, I could block with a Muse or a Time Bender or something like that. Actually, this deck now that I'm looking at, it's kind of light on ambush creatures. I may want to add some more. We just have like Thought Plucker and Muse and Time Bender. So even I like when I build decks, sometimes I don't think about that all these things. You want to make sure you can get into a scenario where you make strong plays when you're behind or when you're being attacked. I've said this before to people. Any deck can win when they're ahead, right? When the plan's going well, executing is not a challenge. How do you come back when you're losing? How do you change the game so that even though you are super far behind, you can still come back? And so I'm looking at this now. I think I probably want more ambush creatures. I'd probably spend some time reevaluating this. This might become a guilt demon or at least one copy will be a Guild Demon, something like that. And that's the kind of thing where you have to look at a deck and think about it, make changes to take over board slots. Like we have 30 fast effects, which is great, um, but we also have to make sure that we're not going to fall behind in scenarios where we don't have creatures on board that can't be targeted. Like we have a lot of removal, but most of it is conditional, and that's important to be mindful of. So we're playing Rage in here, and Rage is again, I think it's a card that's very underplayed in general. This is a control deck, and this is about pumping creatures and getting through damage. So why would I play this, right? There's a couple of reasons. One, we play Kong, and Kong is probably the best Rage target in the game, and so um, just providing breakthrough to Kong in the core set is super aggressive and powerful, and so I think people should consider it more often. We also have other cards again, like we have creatures that would die to some of our spells. Rage would keep them alive, and we have creatures that don't always trade favorably in combat, whereas Rage would suddenly make them trade more favorably for us. Um, this card used to be Brave Squire in the deck when I played Divine Judgments and Palace Guards. So here, or yeah, so there's two Rages. The old deck had two Palace Guards, two Divine Judgments, and two Brave Squire. And it was the same idea of just keeping our guys around through board wipes or through damage and pushing in some aggression. Like I used to love to Brave Squire my Thought Plucker, things like that. You could Rage Thought Plucker, but it's less impactful because the defense is mostly wasted, and the breakthrough is mostly wasted. But it still is extra 4 damage on an unblockable champion. I have spike traps here. So as I said before about lying in wait, we want them to attack in groups. So let's say they attack with two creatures together, like two flyers, whatever. Let's say they attack with Muse and Thoughtplucker, for example. I could spike trap and get both of them, and they played around lying in wait, but then played into spike trap. And so you want to make your opponent think, which way do I go? Which one is the problem? Which one do they have now? And the best case scenario is that you have both and get to punish whichever play they make. But sometimes you don't have one and you get them to play into the one that you do have, things like that. But I like Spike Trap a lot. It also replaces itself, so that's great as long as you can play it. Standalone again, it's a one of, it's a draw two, it's great. We love those. With Sea Titan, it's just amazing. You're almost always going to be ahead on board, like I said last week. And it's again another card that we want to play that it's only a one of, so people will play into our effects and be afraid of us having a second or third copy, things like that. Um, now that I'm thinking about it, I probably want Memory Spirit in this deck, like 1 or 2 copies, and it's for the exact reason of just adding in these, making more value out of one ofs. So let's say you have a one of and you want to get value out of it, and you've used it, and then the situation can come up again where you would need it. You could always Memory Spirit, get the one of back, and then replay it. Um, Obviously, it's less of a blowout when they know it's coming because Memory Spirit shows that it's coming back. But you could also get any of these other cards. I'm actually surprised that I omitted Memory Spirit. I wonder why I did when I built this. I think I just wanted to get Blue Dragons in, and I focused on that. But Memory Spirit's a card that I probably want 1 or 2 copies of for sure. And then Surprise Attack and then Wave, like I was saying before. We want to have off-turn sweepers. This card will banish all champions. So again, certain cards are unbreakable. This deals with them, and so that's really good for us. And it puts them all on the bottom, so they're not recyclable. Wave and Wave of transformation plays really well with that graveyard control motif that I was talking about, and this deck is really heavy in it. We have Corpse Taker, we have Keeper of Secrets, we have Amnesia. We have 9 cards in our deck that are designed to keep our opponent's graveyard completely down, and this just goes further in making sure the card isn't there. And lying in wait's also a banish if that ever comes up. But yeah, so this is a deck again. It's Sage Wild, but when people talk about Sage Wild, they really don't mean decks like this, right? When you hear the players talk about Sage Wild, they really mean the burn deck or the tempo deck. Those are really the core of what people are doing. And I think most of the newer players will gravitate to the burn strategy, like I drew up here. Heavy wild with a little bit of the sage splash. Some of them will play, cards like Thought Plucker. Not everyone plays it, but most people do that I've seen play the Sage Wild deck, and it's because it's their best way to keep card advantage up. There are other things you could play in those spots. You could play like Frost Giants. Tapping down your opponent's blockers is a big deal. You could do other things. It all depends on what you want. You could even cut back and go deeper into wild. Like there was someone who played 57 wild, 3 sage, and it was like an amnesia and 2 lesson learned, and this was when lesson learned was legal in the next set. So it really just depends on what you want to play, um, and how you want to go about it. But again, I think this is the deck that most people think of when they think of Sage Wild, and even though it's Wild Sage. And then the other variant would be this tempo-oriented build. Some of them would play more Psionic Assaults. I've definitely seen 3 Psionic Assault decks before. I think that Psionic Assault, while it's a good card, it's very situational where you want to actually cast Psionic Assault. And so I usually don't play more than one, and the most I've ever played is 2. I really can't justify a third copy. And I think that's also something that people don't think about enough in general, is how often do I want to play this card? How punishing is it to me to have this card when I don't want to play it? And so should I play 2 or 3 copies? I'm surprised to see so many surprise attacks in your deck. How does the evaluation change with core only as opposed to tyrants and uprising? So Derek, in response to your question, is there's not enough quality ambush creatures to play in core in most decks. You really don't want to so in uprising and even with just tyrants, you have so many options that you always have good cards to put in, and you don't have to play 3 copies of Kong, 3 copies of Sea Titan in almost every deck, which if you look is also true for most of my decks, right? And so when you already have those 6 cards in your decks, it's very easy to put surprise attack in because you're going to have a card more often than not to play with it, and you're going to be playing other cards that you could put in with surprise attack. Further, today is about Sage Wild, and Sage Wild as an archetype almost always wants surprise attack. It's one of the key components of getting value out of these slower creatures. Most of my decks are not Sage Wild oriented. I'm typically more into the evil bracket with my cards and my deck designs, and then later when Kark becomes legal, I move more to good. But I'm not usually heavy deep into Sage Wild. It's not my personal playstyle, and it's a lot of because of the problem of surprise attack later. But in core, there's just cards aren't there. So like here, this tempo deck has it. If I was to pull up my decks from last week, I could show you guys, or Derek rather specifically, that surprise attack wasn't in all of them. But even the ones it was in, again, it's just more about playing Kong, playing Sea Titan, playing Palace Guard, cards that are super slow and devastating and create board swings for you. But yeah, it's definitely a card that I think that gets worse as the creatures get better because you don't have to delay your deck or delay your threats. I don't know. Again, originally, like I said, if you read my article or and hear me talk about it before, I thought Surprise Attack was one of the top 5 cards in the game. I think in Limited is still one of the top 5 cards, or it's at least in the top 10 minimum. But yeah, I definitely I have a hard time finding spots that I would want to play cards over the Surprise Attack in these decks, and in Sage Wild especially. Like here, we're talking about cards like I could play Kong, like I said already. T Rex, I could put him in. Sea Titan's amazing. Trike. So that's like 12, what, 15 cards, 12 cards that I could play off of Surprise Attack. If I don't have a card to play Surprise Attack, I'm probably losing. So that's fine. And it creates so much tempo for me that I'm pretty happy about that. And then in the burn deck, like, again, we're just playing so many creatures in here. We have 35 creatures. They're all, or not all, but a lot of them are slow. Trike, Sea Titan, Sea Hydra, T Rex, Kong, and even if we're putting in a card like Worm Hatchling to set up for the future, it's more needed. We don't have all the options that we want. And then in the deck that I was just showing you, the control deck, you know, um, we're playing a lot of slower creatures like Blue Dragon, Winter Fairy, Sea Titan, Kong. We kind of need it now. In this deck, we could cut it, right? We could make some more changes. Um, we could cut 3 surprise attack and a rage and I don't know, maybe a hurricane. Play something a little different. Play something like I don't know. What could we play? We could play those memory spirits. We could play the Brave Squires, like I was saying before. It's all situational based on what's going on in the games and what's happening. And so I don't know. It's hard to find space in these cards. Well, it's not that I don't like Surprise Attack on its merits. Lurking Giant. So Lurking Giant is an aggressive card. I would definitely consider Lurking Giant in the tempo deck. Tom, I'll get back to you in a minute, Donald, or Derek rather. So I would consider Lurking Giant in this core tempo deck. Again, it comes down to slots. I was trying to get value from somewhat from my surprise attacks and from some of these other cards. If I was to play Lurking Giant, it would be over a card like Trike. It would be um, let's see where else could we find a home for it. Maybe the Ice Drakes. It depends on how often we expect things to happen on our opponent's turn. So like Ice Drakes better if they play creatures. Lurking Giant's better if they play draw twos or sweepers. It's all situational. And depends on the meta. Those are the spots I would look at. Like Triceratops is a slower card, but it replaces itself. So our opponent's punishing us and running us out of cards. Is the meta Thought Plucker heavy, which is what I'm expecting. So if the meta is Thought Plucker heavy, then I want to play Triceratops. If the meta is tempo heavy, then I want to play Lurking Giants. It all just depends on what we think is happening. Again, also these are my variants, and I don't know what other people are going to be doing. Erase is a card that I could see be Lurking Giants. Like most of the time, our Lurking Giant will be bigger than the creature they play, so we're basically killing it instead of bouncing it. We're just not drawing two cards. Again, how important is the cards in our hand versus the cards on the battlefield or in play, however you want to use the term. You could cut a Flame Strike for a Lurking Giant. I'd be fine with that. So it really just depends on what you want. To get back to Derek though, yeah, it's part of the situation is just availability and cards that we want to play. And in core only, there's a smattering of cards that we want to play in most of our decks. And after that, it's kind of like picking our battles here and there and targeting certain things. And frankly, the overall power level makes Surprise Attack amazing because there are certain cards that are super splashable and high impact. Kong, Sea Titan, Palace Guard are the three that I could think of off the top of my head that have next to no cost for playing them, have amazing establishing abilities, and are super slow, right? So of those three, that's 9 creatures. The odds of us playing 6 of them are pretty high. And so if we're doing that, already we're priced into Surprise Attack to a degree for those creatures. And if we're going to play other creatures that are also slow, mostly because of the core set being what it is, and the power levels being where they are, Surprise Attack just gets better for us. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it just means that we need to focus specifically on extracting value from our slower creatures. And of course, that Surprise Attack is still great. And I think I said in my article that as we got more creatures come about in Uprising and Tyrants that we wanted to play off turn, that the value of playing Surprise Attack went down, and I still hold that to be a true statement. And I think that the need to play some of these slower, high impact creatures also went away as we got other slow, high impact creatures in our factions, right? So in Sage Wild Burn, we don't need to play Sea Titan anymore because we can play Skaros or we can play Draka, right? But those cards don't exist in Core Set. And we can play Draka's Enforcer, which is an ambush creature that has draw a card on it. So we're definitely going to play that card, right? And so as we start adding other cards that we want to play off turn or slower cards that push us out of the extra faction colors, it's less important to have those cards in our deck and then to generate that value from Surprise Attack. Like Surprise Attacking getting a Draka is okay, but it's not amazing. Like the Draka's ability doesn't really happen until you attack. So now you're just exposing it for an extra turn to give it Blitz. And while that's not bad, like you'd rather put a Burrowing Worm into play, right? Because you'd rather have an 18/18 breakthrough than a 9/9. So it really just depends on what cards or what value we're trying to generate from the Surprise Attack. And so in Core Set, the value that we want is there, and so we play it. And most of our decks are going to need that value because we don't have it inherently in the cards. That said, as we start to develop, and if we get Tyrants and just Tyrants, there's a world where Surprise Attack doesn't make some of the decks, but it still makes a lot of them. I think now with Uprising being legal, only very specific decks want Surprise Attack. Certainly all three copies. I could definitely see like one or two copies of Surprise Attack in a deck like the one that you built, because you want to put the Drinker of Blood in and then play an on-turn sweeper. And so in that specific scenario, I think that um, one or two surprise attacks would go very well with like two Drinker of Blood, maybe even a third copy. And then you could do things like put the Drinker of Blood in with surprise attack, go to your turn, zombie apocalypse, wipe the board, make a bunch of zombies, and then wither the zombies and kill someone from like 100. You can do insane things like that. But in a more tempo oriented aggro deck, surprise attack doesn't really do too much. Skull Mulcher says he's a fan of cards, or they're a fan of any cards that replace themselves as you play them. So do this and draw a card. Um, I mean, I'm not against those cards inherently. Um, I just think that since most of the cards in the game can draw you two cards, and there are actually cards that draw you two cards and do something, a card that only draws you one card and does something has to be important. And like, I'm not against playing cards that draw you one card and do something, right? Like Triceratops just draws you a card, 10/10 breakthrough. I play that card. Um, I'm thinking there's probably a couple others in here. Like Memory Spirit draws you a card from your graveyard, still plus one card, replaces itself. Juggernaut draws a card if you have loyalty, things like that. I have no problem with drawing cards, and I don't mean to say that Surprise Attack is awful, in that you should never ever play it. Right? Again, I have it in all these decks. I just when I first evaluated the card, I had it in like the top 5, and now it's dropped down to like 10 to 20 for me. And even in that, it's at the lower end of that. And again, it's only in certain archetypes that I really value the effect out of my 1 gold cards. It's one of those things where I was talking with someone, and like every card in Epic is really, or almost every card in Epic is really good. So saying a card's great doesn't really mean enough anymore. You have to evaluate it in comparison to what else you could be doing. And so I am a big fan of playing the cards that will get you where you need to go, not cards that will just replace themselves. Um, so Tom's talking again and about cards that replace themselves: Winter Fury, Lars, Champion, Surprise Attack, Triceratops, White Knight, cards that he likes. I mean, I like a lot of those cards too. I like White Knight. I'm playing Winter Fairies in a lot of decks. I like Triceratops, and again here I'm playing Surprise Attack, but um, like the thing, what I care about, like because drawing a card or drawing two cards is replaceable in that all the other cards in the game also have that ability to a degree. I want to make sure that the thing I'm doing matters for my deck and for the metagame. And so putting a creature into play as if it had ambush essentially is what Surprise Attack does for you. That loses a lot of value when most of your creatures already have ambush, excuse me, or most of your creatures have blitz and don't have tribute effects. And so in a metagame where every creature we play has ambush and every creature we have has blitz or blitz, I'm less inclined to want to include surprise attack, because at that point it's really just, can I play a blitz creature a turn earlier and have my gold up to play another blitz creature, or can I put a card on my graveyard to maybe get a recycle trigger? I don't know. I don't know if I value that. um, okay, so Arcane Research is absolutely busted. Skullmulcher brings it up. It's one of my favorite cards in the game. One copy of Arcane Research is really hard to not play. There's no tutor effect in Epic in that you can't like look through your deck, get a card you want, and put it into your hand, and then shuffle your deck. But Arcane Research, like a mid to late game Arcane Research, can get pretty darn close. I've gone as high as 15 on my Arcane Research, and in the top 16 cards, 15 plus the Arcane Research, I was able to find what I wanted. Um, but there are a lot of situations where you just need to have options, and the fact that it's 0 replaces itself, cards stellar. Like it or Unquenchable Thirst are just cards that scale as the game goes longer, are really good in control decks, and so we want to play them. And I played one of each of those in my tricks deck, and I played, I believe, an Arcane Research in my deck that I played at when I won the qualifier on the top 8 day on Monday at Worlds. The Arcane Research is just amazing. Reusable Knowledge is a little less so. I also played one copy of that in that deck. Um, it's still good. It's a card that, again, you play it, you draw a card, and you get the card from your graveyard. That said, it's a little slow, and you have to have a graveyard. And as I've been harping on all the time, you really want to control your opponent's graveyard. So we have to expect that our opponent controls our graveyard, and that limits the value of it. Um, it's like, so compared to Memory Spirit, is do we want a 5/4 body, or do we want a card in our hand, an airborne body? And so a lot of times we're going to want the card in our hand, but there's a lot of times we're going to want the body. And so I'm not sure which one is strictly better, or if one is strictly better, but I like them both. But yeah, so those cards are all great. They both do solid things. And cards that replace themselves are good. You want to have that mentality. If I want to have active plays. I want to have cards in my hand, right? But you want to make sure what you're doing matters, and what cards you have in your hand can translate into value for you, and that you don't forget about creating value on the board, or creating value from your deck slots. And to me, Surprise Attack just feels like playing a 57 card deck more often than not. And while that's not bad, I almost would rather play 66 or 69 cards. I want to pack my deck full of cards that no matter what I have, I'm happy. I don't want to pack my deck full of cards where I'm searching for a specific card, right? And so, in a scenario where you have a 57 card deck and you're looking for a specific card, that's better. But if you're playing a 57 card deck, then maybe you don't have the answer you need available to you in your deck, and you're not open enough. So, seeing a lot of cards, that's important. Being able to reuse cards that you've seen, again, important. I'm not certain that I'm on the boat that just having less cards is good. And by cards, I mean cards in my deck, not cards in my hand. Um, and so again, it just comes down to your own play style and what you can extract value from. The last deck I made was a human tokens deck because I talked about it a little bit last time. I'm not a huge fan of human tokens. This deck isn't really human tokens so much as tokens. And that's mostly because you need to be able to populate the board after a sweeper. And so I have a couple of cards in here that most people wouldn't consider in their human tokens deck. And they're almost all certainly going to be cut when we get to the Uprising cards, or rather the Tyrants cards, because Tyrants comes with a horde of cards for the tokens deck. They print Insurgency and things like that. And so all of a sudden, you go from playing some suboptimal cards to cards that are actually good for just the human strategy. You get Paros, things like that. So this is actually all four colors, and the splashes are minor. Each one is a 6 card splash. We can go over the splashes first, I guess. So here we have 3 Deadly Raids and Sage. I love Deadly Raid in tokens decks. Again, it lets us get away with having smaller bodies. It also pumps all of our guys, so the 2 attack power to each guy is amazing. So immediately you want to have Deadly Raid. The other the other gold card that we had, oh, what was it? I think, oh, wait, sorry, I played the one copy of Frost Giant. That's to tap all of their blockers. It's the same idea, that we get through a horde of blockers by tapping them down as opposed to making our guys unblockable. But it also has Blitz, so it's aggressive, and that's the 4 cards. And then the 2 zeros are Muse. Again, this could be Force Mage Apprentice, this could be Keeper of Secrets, but one of the problems that Tokens is going to have is running out of cards. And so instead of going all in on the early aggression, I'm going for a little bit more long term with Muse. It's a card that I like in every deck. Um, Playing 2 more Frost Giants doesn't make sense, and there's not too many cards that I really want, so I couldn't justify the 3rd copy. Again, if you were able to find things that you were happy about, a 3rd Muse is never a problem. It's never a bad thing. For wild, I have 3 Wolf's Calls. Makes 4 wolves. Wolves are great. You can play it on your opponent's turn, so you make 8 power on their turn. Come to your turn, play Deadly Raid. All of a sudden, that 8 power is now 16 power unblockable. Put a lot of pressure in. So again, it's just a way to populate the board with tokens. We don't really have enough of them in core set, so we're trying to make do. And then the 4th zero from Wild is Pack Alpha. It's one of my favorite cards. It makes tokens, it repeatedly makes tokens, and it pumps other Wild champions. So mostly it'll just pump our Wolf tokens. Like, we have Pack Alpha and we have the Wolf's Call, and then we're playing 2 Rages. Again, it's just extra damage and drawing. I wouldn't play Lash here because Lash is going to kill our tokens. I wouldn't play Flash Fire here because Flash Fire is going to kill our tokens. And so suddenly, like, a lot of the go-to Sage cards, or rather go-to Wild cards, just aren't playable. if we had Wolfspite legal, I would definitely play Wolfspite here. That card would be amazing in this deck, but we have to make do with Core Set only, and so it's Rage. Um, but if you wanted to play Fireball there, it wouldn't be crazy. Like you could do worse. And then the what was left? We did Evil. So we have two Dark Knights again, very aggressive, 5/2, ambush and blitz, unbreakable on our turn. We have a Demon Breach, makes 3 demons on our turn, 2 demons on our opponent's turn, and it's recallable. Recursive army making is great. And then the Risen, I think, is what I had in here, right? Or did I cut the Risens? What was other over here? Yeah, the Risen. So this makes zombies, again, 9 power if we use it on our turn. Gives them blitz. It's just a way to populate the board with demon tokens that we can play off turn. There's a world where this could be try hard. There could be other things. This card gets like immediately cut. It's like the first cut once Tyrants comes around and we get Insurgency and stuff like that. But for now, we kind of have to fill slots, and so this is just what it is. So we get the three of the Risen and 1 Demon Breach, and then the 2 zeros for Dark Knight. Getting into the core of the human cards, we have Courageous Soul, which is going to pump all of our creatures that are in play for 2 combat, which is great. Faithful Pegasus has Blitz, can also pick up one of our humans. We're going to play a lot of them, so we definitely want to play Faithful Pegasus. Ideally, it's going to pick up a card like Palace Guard, the People's Champion, Lord of the Arena. Sometimes it picks up a token, or it could pick up a Courageous Soul to keep it alive. But anyway, the card's solid for us. We're going to play it. Gold Dragon is how we beat the Sage Wild decks or the burn decks. You know, we give our entire team Lifelink or Righteous and we attack, and that's great for us. As long as it can survive, we'll, you know, if we get 1 turn of attacking in, we're probably going to win the game just because we get so much life off of it. Lord of the Arena, we talked about a little bit last time. It's a 13/9 when the turn you play it, and Unbreakable. Every time you can trigger it, it can be a 13/9 Unbreakable. And it must be blocked if able. If anyone was paying attention, I messed up and said it has to attack each turn if able. So I had it backwards. It's T-Rex that has to attack each turn. But this actually has to be blocked. So if your opponent has 1 blocker, you can make them block on this, and then get through with the other things. It'll keep your smaller creatures alive, and it'll likely kill whatever blocks it because it's 13 power on its own. So it's pretty solid for us. Muse we talked about. Noble Unicorn, ambush creature, 6/6, draws a card, replaces itself each, or gets more, replaces every good card you draw or you play after it, which is solid for every 1 good card, 1 gold good card, I mean. Palace Guard, again, it's a human, which is important. It also ambushes 6/8 body, or not ambush, I'm sorry, banishes. And so card's just amazing. I love Palace Guard. I think it's very underplayed by people. People like Kong, people like Sea Titan, they don't seem to like Palace Guard as much. And it's because the body's smaller, but they don't value the banish highly enough. It's one of the better establishing creatures in the game. And so I think it should see more play. Standard Bearer is an ambush creature, makes 2 humans, and it also makes all of your other good champions get +2/+0. So it's important to be mindful of what pumps what and how it pumps it. So Standard Bearer pumps your humans, or Standard Bearer pumps your good champions. Gold Dragon pumps your good champions. Courageous Soul pumps all of your champions, including the wolves and the zombies. And then Rally the People is all your champions. Um, and so yeah, it's later on it gets more important when we get the human pumpers like Paros and Revolt. But for now, I guess it's mostly just all your champions. Um, so the People's Champion, the Rock, as I like to call it, or Dwayne Johnson. He's unbanishable, so if you were to play any of the banish effects like Inheritance of the Meek or Divine Judgment, or if they get played against you, he doesn't die or he doesn't get banished. He makes 2 humans the turn you play him, and every time you play a 1 good card. So he's super solid in any deck that's trying to focus on tokens, or any deck that's going to be playing a banish motif. Like I said before, I have a deck that's just all banish effects, and this is like I play 1 or 2 copies of this as a way to kill my opponent a lot of times. White Dragon, you know, we have 42 good cards, so that means we have 28 1 gold cards. Very often we're going to be able to draw a card off of White Dragon, and because of that, we're just included. It's one of the best cards, the best zeros in the game, pound for pound. And then White Knight, again, it's a human champion, 9/9 Blitz. We're going to have Blitz again, 42 is very reliable, and it draws us a card. Cards that replace itself are great, so we use it. Brave Squire makes a human, makes a guy unbreakable, does everything we need. Demon Breach we talked about. So Feint, this card could be flexible. It's really what you want. I enjoy the card a lot because it's a way to get out of bad spots. Like, let's say you attack and your opponent like ambushes a blocker and puts you in a bad spot, or your opponent is able to do something to, make your attack less ideal. You can back out and recreate blockers for the next turn. So like they don't. It's not in this set, but force field's a card that's legal with uprising. So if your opponent was to force field your attack, you could then feint, get your creatures back on, re-prepare your creatures, and be able to block with them next turn or expend them however you wanted to use them. It also allows you to block multiple times. So if a creature, let's say you're blocking someone and they use rage or lash or something like that, you can feint your way out. Like, sure, you're going to take the damage, but now your creature lives. That could be important for you. It also is a draw two. Again, this could be something else. This could be ceasefire. This could be any other good card that you enjoy. It could be divine judgment. It really just comes down to what are you looking to get out of the cards. Tom's making fun of my rally the people, and I'll get to why we're playing it in this deck. But he's not wrong in saying that it's not the best card. Um, as again as a zero, I value it more than most other people, especially in the tokens decks. Inheritance of the Meek is banish all non-token champions, which rewards us for playing these smaller token creatures. So we're happy to play it. I covered Rage a little bit already, but again, it's just to get breakthrough damage in and to keep some of our other non-token creatures alive in combat, like things that don't necessarily trade well. So like Gold Dragon doesn't always trade well with flying creatures, or Palace Guard, etc. If you could Rage, you can kill things and stay alive. Like Palace Guard with Rage on it kills a T-Rex and lives, things like that. Rally the people. So, well, let's finish first. We did so. Secret Legion is the key card, right? It makes 6 humans, gives them blitz, That's important for any human token deck. Even the ones later are going to be relying a lot on Secret Legion. Like, just making 6 guys is awesome, and it lets all of our pump the team effects get really good. Six. You Secret Legion on your turn, Deadly Raid immediately. That's what, 6 times 3 is 18. If you had a Courageous Soul, now it's 21 plus 6 times 2 is 12, so it's 33. That's a kill. Things like that. Brave Squire makes another human. Things like it all works out in the end, but it's super solid. But so what Rally the People does for this deck. Uh, Tom is saying that he's gonna make fun of me for playing Rally the People over Watchful Gargoyle, and there's a reason. So several things happen to tokens decks. One, they get run out of cards. Cards with recall help you with that. It also is a generic pump. +1/+0 for the whole team is super valuable, right? Like we're playing cards like the Risen, Pack Alva, Wolf's Call, Secret Legion, the People's Champion, Standard Bearer, cards that really expand us wide. So we want to be able to get a payoff for that, and our payoff for that is going to be Rally the People. Now later we get cards like Revolt, and we get cards like Paros at the 0 slot, and this immediately goes away way of the dodo. But Rally the People in the early token decks is what you need. You need a free pump spell, and it also makes you a guy. And so that's really good, And if you're asking me if Rally the People is the best card in the deck, it's not. If you're asking me if it's the reason why we play the deck, it's not. But we have to really stay true to what our deck's about, and our deck's about going wide and winning with a wide team. Rally the People does that for us in a way that none of the other zeros do, like Watchful Gargoyle, one of my favorite cards in the game. It's a 2/3. What's really good? Making fun of my Rally the People, Tom. It's really good at what we're doing. I can say that. It may not be really good in and of itself, but it is a really good card. That's for you, Martin. Um, and it does what we need. And if you're asking me would I play human tokens if I was trying to ladder on the app, the answer is decidedly no. But if I was going to try to make a humans deck work, I would have to embrace what we're doing, and that's trying to go wide with a bunch of small creatures. And this is a way to consistently do that, get value from those creatures, and keep cards in play and cards in our hand and gold usage. Again, it's just really tough in core set to pull off human tokens. I really think we need Uprising to make it realistic, or even just tokens in general. And then once we get Uprising, it gets a lot better. Like I said, we get Paros, we get Insurgency, we get Revolt. Those are the quick and easy ones, but there are some other cards too that get upgraded from the other colors. We don't need as much of a splash. We get Battle Cry, which is a +3/+3 and breakthrough to everybody. and if it's our opponent's turn and we're using it defensively, draw 2 cards. So like that card's really good. Tom is going to make fun of me in his token deck explanation, and that's fine. Um, just because he doesn't have the courage to play rally the people like I do, I can't really do too much about it. But yeah, so again, this isn't the deck that I'm super. Is the app only launching with core? Correct. So if you were paying attention in the Kickstarter, if you were reading it, we're only going to have core legal in the app. We don't know yet if we're going to get anything like um, uh, Tyrants first, then Uprising, or both are going to get legal together. We don't know yet. We don't know what's going to be legal in time for their tournaments. I know for the alpha, or I'm expecting that in the alpha they're not going to have Worlds qualifiers. If they do, that'd be amazing for everyone who kickstarted, right? So if you backed them, you're the only people who are legal to play in the event, which is pretty amazing for you. I don't think that's the plan. It could be what happens. I don't really know. I know they have talked about having in-app qualifiers a lot. Was in the Kickstarter, but I don't know the timing of it. As you can see, Tom mentioned that Tyrants and Uprising are going to be added later, but we don't know the schedule for that. Like I said, we don't know if it's going to be Tyrants, wait a couple of weeks, Uprising, or hey guys, here's Tyrants and Uprising, go play. Or are they going to add the other? Like I'm expecting another expansion in the next, I don't know, 4 to 5 months. So if the timeline is to get Uprising and Tyrants in the next 3 months, are they going to drop the next expansion when it goes live in paper? Are they going to delay it a little bit? Are they going to hit delays and they're all going to come together? I really don't know. It's going to be interesting to find out. But yeah, the reason why all of my decks that I've been talking about on the stream have been core only is because that's what's going to be legal on the app. Um, so he's saying that they hope that they step one of them in at a time. I'm conflicted about that. So I definitely would like to see one, like, as far as metagame evolutions go, one at a time would most ideally reflect what happened in paper and in real life, or what should have happened in real life. That said, I sort of have this desire to just get legal. Like, and by legal I mean what's going to be legal in the qualifiers that they're playing right now, right? So if you're going to the event in Pandemonium next month, which I plan to, uh, it's Dark Draft or Random 60, Build 30, and then Dark Draft Top 8 with Core Set, Tyrants, and Uprising legal. And like I wouldn't be able to prepare for that effectively without those things being legal on the app. And um, I just think that I don't like having a difference in between what's legal and what is on the app. You're saying that you think for newer players or less experienced players it would be easier to digest. Um, yes and no. So I feel as if it's easier to digest incrementally, but a lot of that understanding is irrelevant. Like again, talking about a lot of these cards in the core set only decks, they're completely gone now in the metagame. Like you're not going to see a feint in a constructed deck. You're not going to see, well, this is a bad example because it's human tokens, but you're not going to see Rally the People even in human tokens, right? You're not going to see Wolf's Call in most decks. You're not going to see the Risen in most decks. Again, most of these cards were just phased out. You don't need the splashes anymore in core human tokens. And then, so Tom is saying when it officially gets released out into the public that Tyrants and Uprising will be available. That's what White Wizard has said, and that makes sense. I don't mind that being the plan. I just want that to be sooner than later. Is kind of what I'm getting at. Like I have this app to play with my friends and to play with my teammates and to play with high quality people to get games with, and to have a more cleaner interface than some of the other programs that try to mimic the Epic experience. And so, if I can make that be valuable to my real life testing, that'd be amazing. And the sooner that is, the better, right? So, like, for someone like me and Jonah, who lives like 45 minutes away, we see each other like once or twice a month to play Epic. We'll be able to play daily. And, like, sure, we're going to play a lot on the app, but if the app is core set only and the tournament that we're preparing for has everything, then we really can't do adequate preparing with the app. All we can do is, try out new weird combos and cards and synergies and try to look for different timing sequences. and I just wish that that wasn't the case just yet. And so I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Again, I'm hopeful that it'll be sooner than later that we have Tyrants and Uprising legal. And I would rather them just give us Tyrants and Uprising together and say go play than to do Tyrants and then Uprising. That said, I'd rather they give us Tyrants in 2 weeks and then Uprising in 4 weeks than give us Tyrants and Uprising in 4 weeks, right? The sooner anything is available, the better. I just don't know what their plans are. I'm not involved with their decision making process, and I actually haven't seen any of them since Worlds. They just had PAX East this weekend, which was a huge success. I have a bunch of Veldens that I was able to acquire, and I think I'm going to give out some of them as promos for people who watch the stream. And eventually, hopefully, we're going to get to a point where I'm a partner with Twitch and I can do sub bonuses and things like that. And we'll do in-app gaming, like we challenge me in the game and we'll stream it together, stuff like that. But yeah, so um, I hope to see them soon. Like I said, I'm definitely going to be at the event at Pandemonium in April. So if you guys want, definitely come to that. Pandemonium is a great store. They had the first qualifier that they had fired there at a store anyway, and so I went up with Jonah, and then we met up with Rich Shea, and the three of us, the three people from Plucky who went to the tournament top aided. We ended up not winning. Bill Anderson, who's an amazing Epic player, he had won Gen Con's first major tournament for Epic back in 2015, I believe. And then 2016 was won by John Tatian, who also made top 8 at Pandemonium. The Pandemonium event was just stacked. Everyone except for the one player who doesn't play Epic anymore, who top 8ed that tournament, was at Worlds and made top 8, or made Worlds rather. And so it was just a pretty, like I said, deep run. High quality players through and through. If you want to make it to Worlds in 2017 and you can make it to Pandemonium, you really should because you're going to learn a lot from all the different players. We're all pretty friendly and open. It's going to be a great event. So yeah, I was using Foundry today to show everyone the decks. These are the more common ones that have been uploaded. As you can see, this guy Tom S Epic Gaming has put up a bunch of his. He's pretty good at Epic and he's a pretty good deck builder. Um, the deck that I'm probably most known for now is the Kark Life Gain deck that I played to win my 2017 invite. And so, as you'll see here, this is to me one of the better control archetypes. There are a lot of things I would do to this deck to make changes. Cards that I like are still here though. You see here only one Amnesia. That's really tough, but as I've said before, Stage Zeros are so tight. They're just so tight. And when I cut the Thought Pluckers, um, that Tom convinced me to do that and made other room for other colors. And I went deeper into evil, which you can see here. And so because of that, I had to make spots in the zeros. And I wanted to keep the arcane research. It was important to me. I talked about that earlier. Um, so once the game goes live, I'm going to be streaming the game. I'm not afraid to also do a podcast. Tom Sorensen, Derek Arnold, and myself had tried one, and the problem with the podcast was that we had an audio issue, and so it got canceled. Like we lost the whole podcast, and I've just been so busy with my life that I haven't had time to sit down and really do it again with them. We were trying to do it with Worlds, like it was right after Worlds that we did it. I want to say it was November, maybe mid-December that we did it, and we just never got it off the ground. And so now I'm kind of waiting for the uptick of the season, and we're starting to get into that now as the qualifiers are coming in and things are happening. The caveat to all of this is that most of the events that they're running are Dark Draft and Sealed, and while I'm not against talking about them, that's not where my passion is, and it's not really what I'm best at. I'm still getting better. I do have a YouTube channel, and I'm posting the videos to that channel. I haven't gone, I haven't done much work on that channel yet, and so it's really bare bones. But it's just my my Gmail, I think, which is Thomas Edward Dixon. Let me see if I can just pull it up over here, and then I'll drag it home or my channel. So here we go. Um, trying to think if this is going to do what I want or not. I have the video manager. Again, I haven't done enough of it. This is what it's coming up as. But the past two sessions are on that, and this one will be on that. I'm aware that this is pretty much just a strategy podcast or vidcast, if you will. But the caveat is that we just don't have the game up yet. Yeah, the first sub was a friend of mine from Magic a long time ago, and I never had put anything on it. So it's really just this epic stuff. But I will upload every one of my my streams, and I plan on streaming 4 or 5 times a week, if not more, for 2 to 3 hours at a time, maybe more, depending on how things are going and how my night is, and who is available online to play with. So yeah. Anyway, this deck is really good. I really enjoyed it. As you can see here, I have the the one Amnesia, the one Arcane Research, and then I want to say there was the 2 Frantic Diggings, right? So there's 4 Sage Zeros, and like the 3rd Frantic Digging would be so good. The 2nd Amnesia would be so good, but it's just finding space. Like we want to be so deep into good. Like we're only 33 cards deep, and we're running Kark, which has a loyalty trigger. Angel of Light, which is a key loyalty trigger. Angel of Mercy plays off of triggers. Brand has loyalty triggers. Noble Unicorn has loyalty. Marcus has loyalty. Like so many of our cards are requiring us to have these high loyalty counts, and we really just don't right now. And so we can't go lower on the good cards. And we even want more copies of the good cards. Like a 3rd Brand would be great. A 2nd Watchful Gargoyle. I love that card. I've said it before. I'll say it again. A 3rd Bodyguard. Like, there's just so many tight spots that finding places is really difficult. Evil is probably the easiest one to do, and even then, like, we could be playing Corpsemonger, we could be playing, we have the Wither, we have the Consumes, we could play Heinous Feast, we could play more copies of that, we could play a Corpse Taker. There's so many different ways to go with it. The best card I played on the day, or I'll say the best card, but the one that the least other people were playing was Martial Law. I love this card. As a control player, this just does so much for us. Like putting 5 humans into play is like you could just be 5 blockers. Like if they have a couple of you know ground forces, just putting 5 humans into play is great. Banish all champions on our opponent's turn and letting them have 4 humans is fine. We can easily beat 4 humans, and if it's on our turn, they get no bonus whatsoever. So like think of it like this: Divine Judgment is banish all champions only on your turn. So that's basically, if we just were to cover, if it is an opponent's turn, right, that line of text, we get that. Draw 2 cards versus put 5 humans into play. Situationally, one's better than the other. In this deck, I often found that I had a lot of cards in my hand, so needing to draw 2 wasn't as critical. That said, putting 5 attackers in, even on our opponent's turn, something that happened, or like put in 5 humans, block with 1, have 4 up, attack, then sweep, things like that. Those came up more often than I expected, and the card really performed for me. This in this deck, this slot used to be Inheritance of the Meek, but I valued this card higher because I didn't feel like I needed the draw, and I really wanted to test out the human token aggression strategy, and it worked a lot better. When I won the tournament, I didn't win most of my games by 60 life. I won most of my games by attacking with chip damage, and Martial Law was a big part of that. As I said earlier, the reusable knowledge, I did like the card. It was great for me. That said, I do imagine that by the time reusable knowledge is legal on the app, you should be expecting to see a lot more graveyard hate. I think people are going to go back to the models that I was showing in my decks where they have 6 to 9 recurable graveyard hate cards. And like in most of my decks, we didn't even see Guilt Demon, and I think Guilt Demon's one of the best ones. I played against a good friend of mine, Chris Shaner, at Gen Con when I won my invite to 2016, and he had a turn 2 Guilt Demon, and it just totally delayed me. And like I ended up winning the match, but it was really hard, and it was mostly because Guilt Demon controlled my graveyard. And that was one of the first times that I felt punished for being so greedy on a graveyard strategy. And I realized that I could do the same thing recurrently to other people, where like Keeper of Secrets, Guilt Demon, even Corpse Taker, those cards really could punish my opponents for not having, for relying on their graveyard triggers like Recycle and things like that. We got to play Soul Hunter in this deck. This card's actually really, really, really good in the mirror, which people don't really expect. But like, if you just kill your Soul Hunter, like you discard it to hand size, and then drain essence your Soul Hunter, like as soon as it comes into play, That's a 14-point life swing, and that's usually like enough to get you the tempo to win the game. And again, if you kill it right away, it comes right back. So the next turn you get it again. You could do something like sweep, right? So if they played Angel of Light to gain 10 life, then you get your Soul Hunters back, and then Apocalypse. It's another 5 damage. You've now made this gain 5, not gain 10. Um, there's other cards in here too, like there's a Plague. It's another sweeper. It's all about just keeping our board clear. There's a Final Task. So Final Task is one of my favorite cards in the game, and the reason is that Final Task gets its value back. And so I think I said this last week or the first week, but Chamberlain Kark is actually awful. Like the actual card, you almost never want to play. You don't want to reveal your entire hand to your opponent. Gaining 2 life per card is suboptimal, and it only matters, or not only matters, but you only really care about it when you're going to win off the 60. And so you don't want to have 3 copies, like I was saying earlier. You don't want to get punished for having all of these cards in your hand. But you also need to be able to find it quick enough to win. And so what you need to be able to do is, I have 2 copies, but if I have to discard it, then I can get it back with Angel of Mercy, or I can get it back with Final Task. And like I said, I've done things like that before, where like my opponent was, I was at like 40. I end step Final Task or whatever on my opponent's turn with their gold down. I Final Tasked a Kark back, got to 50, got to my turn, played Kark, won the game. Or excuse me, Angel of Mercy Kark back from the graveyard, same deal, things like that. Um, Someone says Soul Hunter is one of their favorite cards. It's really really slow. So Soul Hunter is great if you don't ever spend a gold on it. If the only way that you ever activate the Soul Hunter ability is that you discarded it, then it's one of the best cards in the game, right? A literally 0 mana 5/5 that comes back from the graveyard and deals 5 damage whenever it's broken is amazing. But for a gold, it's just awful. And so we need to figure out ways to cheat it into play. And the best way to do that, like I said, is just to hand size. The lesson learned Ancient Chant draw 4 trigger is one of the easier ways to get over your hand size. And so that usually is how I got it into the graveyard. It also is a great punish for Thought Plucker or Knight of Shadows, which comes with Tyrants. Like Knight of Shadows changes so much of the game. Like the Sage Wild decks love Knight of Shadows. Knight of Shadows is 9/4 unblockable tribute. You draw a card, they discard a card. Card's just stellar, really amazing. And so almost every deck picks up Knight of Shadows, and then because of that, you want to play cards that punish the Knight of Shadows. And so Soul Hunter is one of the better ones for that. You also get Blind Faith, which is one of my favorite abilities. So you could do things like discard your Soul Hunter, comes back, they attack you with Knight, you play Blind Faith, it loses unblockable, you block with Soul Hunter, they take 5, and you get Soul Hunter back. A lot of really fun interactions that Blind Faith creates. It's one of just the better cards in the game. Um, I also play Ceasefire in this deck, and like I keep going up and down on Ceasefire. It's one of these cards that the further away I get from competitive play, as far as like playing regularly, the less I like Ceasefire, and then I start playing again with like high quality people, and it gets better and better for me. To draw 2, it does something. In this deck, it does more. In this deck, it forces our opponent to no longer attack us, and that means that we can safely get through an extra turn. So like if they attack us with 1 creature, we can play our 0 cost ambush blockers and then survive because Ceasefire prevents more damage that turn. It forces our opponents to play bad cards like Flame Strike and whatnot to punish us for using our gold when their gold is up because they can't punish us with creatures anymore. So they either have to draw 2 or burn us, and in either case, we're pretty okay with it because the burn spells are inefficient compared to the creatures, and as far as punishing goes, and the draw 2 effect we've matched by drawing 2 with Ceasefire. So like I had spoken with someone about how I would probably cut Ceasefire from this deck, and when I said that to them, I meant it, and I still kind of want to cut it because it doesn't do anything on its own, but it essentially plays as Time Walk for us, and that's amazing. And so I don't know. Again, it's one of those cards where I just keep throttling back and forth on myself. I want a higher impact card, but for what my deck is trying to do, like in the games that I'm trying to win by 60, by getting to 60, Ceasefire is amazing. In the games that I'm trying to chip, it's not amazing. And so it just really depends on how you want to take the deck and go with the deck and what you want to do with it. Because I cut the Amnesia down to 1, I have the Erratic Research and I played a Heinous Feast. Again, that was just trying to control the graveyards better, being mindful. I talked about Blind Faith. It's just one of my favorite cards in the game. To me, I think it's the most powerful because its effect is completely unreplaceable. There's nothing in this that does it. It's one of the only cards in the game that says your cards don't do what they say. Um, and so many people, like so much of the value of cards is tied into their abilities, that getting rid of them, like the amount of gold getting rid of your opponent's abilities can generate for you as far as the value goes is just, it's astronomical and it's exponential based on how many cards and abilities are in play. It's just amazing. Consume comes with Uprising, 3 damage to a creature, gain 3 health. It's perfect for Kark. It's a 0 cost answer to Muse and Thought Plucker that also plays with the get to 60 life game plan. Um, Drain Essence again in Kark is just amazing. Gain 9 life even on its own is fine. Killing a creature that could kill you is even better. Final Task I talked about. Inner Peace looping. Even though we're a Kark deck and we're trying to get to 60 to a degree, we only play 2 copies of Inner Peace, and it's because they chain off of each other and most people weren't playing sufficient Graveyard Punish. It could be realistic to go up to 3 copies, but it's also okay not to. It really depends on what you want to do. Lesson learned, we're playing because of the Ancient Chant synergy. For those that don't know, you play an event from your discard pile without paying its cost, then banish it and discard. So if you play an event from your discard pile, you're pulling a card from your graveyard. So if it's Ancient Chant, you draw a card because of that. Then Ancient Chant draws 2 cards. That's cards 2 and 3. Then Ancient Chant resolves, goes to your graveyard. That's copy, or that goes to your graveyard. Then it gets banished. When it gets banished, leaves your graveyard again. That's card number 4. So that interaction is really powerful, and it's very much, I don't say it's dominated, but it's in every deck now because getting 4 cards from 1 gold is impossible otherwise. And a lot of times you can discard Ancient Chant to Thought Plucker, Knight of Shadows, or Psionic Assault. So you're not even losing super tempo. Like if they go turn 1 Thought Plucker, you discard Ancient Chant, cast Lesson Learned. You've now got an extra card because of Thought Plucker, not lost a card. So you're up 4 -1, so you're up 3. They're only up 1 from the Thought Plucker. Good night, Tom. And yeah, we'll be on the app as soon as it comes out, hopefully Wednesday. So now we have Wither here as well. Card's great. Removal. Zombie Apocalypse, off turn sweeper, break all champions. So we're very happy with that. Could this card be something else? Sure. But as I've said before, I want to just have fast effects. I want to be playing on my opponent's turn as often as possible. And here you can see I have 34 fast effects. Um, it's just very important to make sure that you are able to play important cards when you need to. So here's like a 5-card hand. You can see here we have Ancient Chant for turn 1. We have Divine Judgment, so we have a sweeper to stay alive. We have a 0-cost answer from Muse and Thought Plucker. We have Marcus, and we have Angel of Mercy. All these cards are good. Depending, and so if they have Thought Plucker as well, we can discard the Marcus, put it into play. So like this is a great hand against the Sage Wild deck. Good night, sir. So like against Sage Wild, if we're on the draw, right, we let our opponent go. They're gonna play something. If it has Blitz, we're not super happy about it. We can consume anything small. If not, we just go Ancient Chant, right? And then we draw 1 card. It's Drain Essence. We draw a 2nd card. It's Frantic Digging. So now we have Ancient Chant in our graveyard. Our gold's down. It comes back to us. We draw for the turn. We got Lessons Learned. So now we have the combo. We're very happy about that. Depending on the board state, we might want to sweep. We might want to just play Marcus. It really just depends on what's happening. So like I would probably, if their creature was smaller than Marcus and they didn't show me a Thought Plucker early, I'd probably play Marcus here, accepting that if they had something for me, it would be unfortunate. I would draw a card by revealing Angel and Divine Tribute, or Divine Judgment rather. So now we have Bodyguard, so we have a great card to discard to a Thought Plucker. So we got rewarded for playing aggressively. We have our blocker, we pass back to them. If they play another creature, again, we have Consume Up for Muse, we have Consume Up for Thought Plucker. If we have to discard, we discard Bodyguard because of the recall, and we let our opponent go. They attack into us. Depending on the side, on what we do, we can block with Marcus. If not, we can Drain Essence the creature. If they force us to, we can do a combo of Consume and Drain Essence, so now we can kill anything with 12 toughness or less. And if not, we can chump block with Bodyguard. We have a lot of action. If we discarded Bodyguard, we would have probably played Consume on the Thought Plucker. And then if we draw 2 with Divine Judgment, we'll get the Bodyguard back into our hand to reblock with. It all depends on what's happening in the game and what they force into us. And eventually, we're looking for this situation where we lesson learned onto the Ancient Chant and draw four, and kind of just take over the game from there by having, if you just draw four cards, right here, we just have two off turn. We have three off turn sweepers and 10 life in our hand. We just start controlling the course of the game. We have the on turn sweeper here. We have Angel to rebuy our Marcus or our Angel later, right? So we're very happy with this. And this again, this is on by turn three. We've now seen what 5, 10, 13 cards. It's just pushing, 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 keeping our life total up. We have what 10, 13, 22 life right here, plus any like chip life we've saved from not losing in the form of Marcus, Bodyguard, our ambush creatures. We can recur the Angel of Light through the Angel of Mercy. We keep our loyalty triggers up because of recall. That's kind of just how the deck's designed. It's very powerful. I would definitely like if if you're going to a constructed qualifier and you want to win the qualifier and you're expecting Sage Wild decks, this is the deck I would play. I think it's very, very good against Sage Wild. Rescue Griffin in particular is just amazing. This isn't legal in core, but in paper, this card's just amazing. It's a zero cost card that beats most gold cards, and that's really high value. So before I go for tonight, is there anything anyone would like to talk about or has a question about? Would like to, uh,